Hello, everyone. Episode 32 of the DFS Down Under show. Big episode tonight here in Hobart Town. And with myself, Smatho 10 is my reliable host on my right-hand side. Big Hef, how are you today, buddy?
I'm good. We've had some internet issues, and reliable is not the word I'd be
dude.
using to describe me at the moment. Been a massive week, hasn't it already? Very controversial. Toby Green, of course, somehow got off with his eye gouging, got away with that. Taylor Harris got a silver statue, Smatho.
Oh, yes.
And you know I'm a massive Twitter man. I love Twitter.
Yes.
And Twitter is full of bad takes, and I reckon you've got the clubhouse leader for worst take of the year with your tweet this afternoon.
Look,
matched only by your incredible, ignorance of the whole movie scene. The avocado rang me in a muck lather this afternoon, pulled me out of a meeting and said, we've got urgent issues, and proceeded to tell me you haven't seen Caddyshack. Like, what's going on, Smather?
What was going on is that the avocado asked me to do some Caddyshack theme work for the PGA this year, and I've nodded my head, just going, "Yep, cool, no worries," and then proceeded not do any Caddyshack theme stuff. So when he said, "What are we talking about Caddyshack?" I was like, I have to be honest with you, I haven't seen the movie, and that got me talking about I actually don't watch movies at all. So,
Wow.
Yeah,
you went for some strength in numbers on Twitter and got slated by every single person that happened to reply. So, good start of the day for you. Let's hope we can lift for this episode. What do you reckon?
Okay, all right. Just it's not my fault if I don't watch movies, but yeah, look, there is a couple that I watch, but yeah, the response was a little bit indifferent today once I shared my thoughts.
We'll dig into that a bit more, I think.
Oh, really? All right. Well, there's a massive show here tonight. So we do talk about fantasy football and fantasy sports here in Australia. So, as always, with our show, we always start with Smatho's thumbs up. And this week, our thumbs up goes to our DraftKings VIP experience winner in Chaps 297, who is on his or her way. No, it's Matthew, that's right. He's on his way to Boston on behalf of Clinton at the Australian VIP at DraftKings here in Australia. So he's going to go watch the Patriots after winning the contest here. If we bring up his particular side that got the biscuits done. And Hef, I haven't really asked you, are you a bit of an NFL DFS nuffy, are you? Or you're just one of those casual guys who think that they shouldn't wear helmets when they play?
Nuffy would describe you pretty well, I reckon. I have seen The Waterboy, though, Smatho. Have you seen The Waterboy, surely?
That's the one with Sandler when he plays NFL.
Yep.
That's right, because that's the scene when he did these foosballs for the devil. Is that the one?
Yes, good.
Yes, that's the
chalk one up for you, Smatho. How close was this at the top of the leaderboard? In a winner-take-all contest with obviously a massive prize. I hear Lion for Life was flying at the end, but the Chaps held on and off he goes over to America. What a prize.
It is an absolute ripper of a prize. And I have to let you in a secret, Hef, because usually on a sweat, I'm usually dead after a couple of hours into this kind of thing. But Smatho wasn't dead in this particular contest. And I really had to zip my lips because I was in the top 25 with 5 players to go in the afternoon slate. So I've nailed the first 4 players. And as JK said in the podcast, you had to get up and make sure that if you're in a good position that you go the chalkiest side of the field. Well, I was in that position and I left my team and I had a Tampa Bay stack and they were atrocious. And by the time 8 o'clock rolled around and looking at the phone, it's just like, what could have been? I changed my quarterback as well. I had originally had Lamar Jackson and he went absolutely nuts as well. So if I had kept my original quarterback and probably the guy who was teamed up with him, I may have got a sneaky thumbs up from yourself to me. So, but anyway, that's winner take all. And as you can see on off the screen, I'm sure you can see now, but yeah, end up being 20th out of 100. So yeah, it was good. But 2
That's
thumbs up. We'll
DFS.
have to go to chaps 297. Mate, well done. 2 thumbs up for you. Get the emoji up. And back on to me now. There's your 2 thumbs up for you, chaps. Well done. Fantasy football down under, desperately unlucky, line for life. Look, all desperately hard luck stories, but there only could be one winner for that. Also, little whisper came through today from one of our DFR writers here, our AFL guru in Jesse Penfold, and he sent some correspondence across my desk here and asked me to just bring this up on the show. And I thought I'd had a quick look at it, and I thought, hey, it's just pretty worthy. So, what photos do you have? We bring up this particular article on the DFR website from the Brisbane Richmond preview, and have a look at these names that he decided to tout for our readers of our site. Have a look at those, Hef.
Cam Rayner, Shane Edwards, Luke Hodge, Steph Martin, and Lockie Neal. Yeah, that he pretty much nailed it, didn't he? I saw the Dragon team made the top 10. Is that true?
Nailed it. Yeah. He was pretty up and about old Penfold. So little sneaky shout out. No thumbs for you, Jesse, because obviously you didn't win that slate with your Dragon, but exceptional work from you, mate, and hopefully that continues with your rest of your previews for the rest of the AFL year. We've already got live the 2 finals coming up, which we'll break down later in the show. But as you know, Hef, we really refer to Jesse's work here at DFR.
Yeah.
Now,
no, he does very good work.
You're on fire tonight, Hef. On fire. Speaking of fires, I haven't really seen any fire movies. Is there any fire movies that I should be watching in my journey coming up?
That's not a bad one that comes to
Backdraft.
mind.
Oh yeah, yep. Is it like a Chicago Fire? Was that a TV show or something?
That's a TV show, Smatho.
Oh, okay, I won't watch that.
It was Backdraft. It was someone like Seagal or something caught in a tunnel, but Kurt Russell, was it? Backdraft. There you go. I've only seen it the one.
Oh, shut up, avocado. All right, here we go.
By avocado, I'm mixing up my movies now. Yeah, I did tweet that I'm far from the top of the tree when it comes to the movies, but yeah. Well, let's leave that there and move on.
All right, let's run through some news, Hef, because this is probably one of the biggest DFS weeks we have here in Australia. We've got so many sports running this week, so many articles that are going to be posted on the DFR website. So let me whip through some news for you, Hef, and you can always just chime in if you've got something to say. First of all, at the start of the week, we've introduced one of our brand new writers here at Daily Fantasy Rankings in NBA with Kev. He's jumped on board here with our team, and he's going to be looking at our futures markets before the NBA season kicks off in approximately around 5 to 6 weeks' time. So we're going to have Kev give us his thoughts on particular plays that he's going to look at and particular markets for NBA futures. So I know you have for a bit of an NBA nut. It's good having Kev on board.
Yeah, good article to start things off with his MVP analysis. Get on and have a read of that if you haven't already. I just keep thinking of Big Kev, very excitable bloke. And I'm really looking forward to some of these long-term markets just before the season rolls in. It's not that far away, NBA. It comes around really quickly. We're getting some great basketball action with the FIBA World Cup at the moment. Jesse's been doing some great previews for the FIBA tournaments on DraftKings. I saw you had a little head wobble one night on Twitter. You followed him in and had a little result, Smatho. So, yeah, there's heaps going on in basketball. It's only going to get bigger this year, I think.
It's going to be huge. Going to be deep. Obviously, he's going to line up some more markets, including Rook of the Year, stat leaders, conference leaders, etc. So we'll have those earlier each week leading up to the NBA season.
Beautiful. On that, Smatho, some good basketball movies. White Men Can't Jump. Have you seen it?
Look, when I was a kid, but I can't remember. Look, was that Wesley Snipes in that one?
Snipes and Harrelson. Yeah. One Celtic Pride, absolute classic.
Nope.
You remind me a bit of the Celtic Pride guys, actually, Smatho. Put that one on your list.
All right.
Little diehards, and they end up. Yeah, you put them down. Air up there. Okay, that's getting a bit carried away. But there's heaps. You've got to get onto these, Smatho. We'll sort you out. Don't worry about that.
I remember the cricket. Oh, mate.
What about the cricket?
Oh, I've been watching some great Ashes action. I actually fell asleep on day 5? I nearly gave up on it again and fell asleep, and obviously woke up in the morning to do our retaining the Ashes, which is bloody brilliant. But the fifth test rolls around tomorrow night, or Thursday night. So we've got a $12,000 contest on DraftStars and $8,000 on Moneyball. Been very popular, this Ashes series. Very easy to get teams in. And obviously I've put up another preview on the DFS site going through the batters and bowlers for this particular contest. Could be very interesting in terms of selection again, Hef, for the Australians and especially for England. I've got a nice little sneaky in the Dragon, which involves Ben Stokes. So if you get on the website and check out my article, I reckon if Ben Stokes doesn't bowl, there's a couple of markets that you might want to put yourself into. Hef, have you got any sneaky news coming out of England for the fifth test?
Just that they could drop about 4 of their batsmen and no one would really be surprised. Is Roy still in the team? Surely he can't keep playing. He's an absolute disgrace of a test batsman, Jason Roy. They should just open with Leach the way they're going. Really want to see the Aussies drive it into them one more time.
How'd you find their celebrations the other when they won?
They seemed a bit low key. I've seen much bigger efforts from some of the third grade boys over the years, but they've still got a game. They haven't won the series. Let's not just be celebrating a draw. Let's see them win, and then I reckon we'll really see them turn it on.
You got any cricket movies for me off the top of your head? I'm sure there's some Bollywood classics that you've seen in your time.
Something, I reckon. I can't think of any cricket movies. We'll let that one go through the keeper from Avocado. What about, you've been bugging me all week about the golf, Smatho. Before we get into it, Caddyshack, you said you haven't seen that. Surely you've seen Happy Gilmore.
Oh, I've seen yes, I have seen Gilmore, yes.
I don't want thinking Happy Gilmore is going to be one of the greatest movies ever made. I'm really jealous of you, Smatho, because you can go and watch all these movies now. You've never seen them before. You're in for the time of your life. What about Tin Cup? You're probably hundreds to have watched Tin Cup.
No.
Good. Go and get that one on the list too. Actually, that was recommended on Twitter too by someone else, so it's not just me making up names on the spot here. But what have we got for the PGA this week?
Now, while I talk about the PGA, you need to update me on this poll that DFR put up today. So let me talk about the PGA. After one of the longest off-season in the history of the PGA, which is approximately 2 weeks, we have the brand new 2019-2020 season for the PGA. We start with the military service or salute to the military salute at the Greenbrier is what it's called. There's a $300,000 contest on DraftKings and a $6,000 contest on DraftStars. We've also the 3-ball contest, which I enjoy playing as well. What you find here, Hef, is that they've had the Corn Ferry Tour, which is kind of like the second tier, the Magoos, and they've managed to get 50 new players from the Corn Ferry who graduated to the PGA Tour. So they're actually all in this particular event, kicking off on Thursday evening here in Australia. Another preview's gone up, and I've actually put in some suggested sides for DraftKings and for DraftStars this week, just to mix it up in this kind of regular season, what we call the swing season here in America. So, go check that out. How's that Twitter poll going for me at the moment?
Did you say they added 50 new players?
Yeah. So you lose 50 per.
That sounds like Carlton's off season, doesn't
it? It does sound like that, but there's 21 rookies, and there's guys who lost their PGA card, then went back to the Corn Ferry and actually won to come back on again. So it's like they got delisted and they got picked again. So, but that kicks off on Thursday night. But I'll see. Is Caddyshack up on those movies I need to watch?
Definitely. So on the screen there, we've got the poll. 39. You haven't seen Rocky, Smatho?
No, not one of them.
Well, 39% says Rocky. Oh, you could just go straight through the whole thing. Avocado's really pushed Major League, and 23% that's backing him up there.
What's this fourth movie? Is it 2 leagues or something? I've never heard of it.
2 for the money.
Two leagues.
Sports betting movie. Smatho.
Oh,
a nice old rort. No, that's another one up your alley. Right up our alley, actually, Smatho. A guy that doesn't have a clue giving tips. Yeah, but what else we got?
Uh, uh,
NFL, week 2 NFL.
NFL, yes.
That's
The next
coming
news
around
item here is
nice and quick.
NFL week 2 of the NFL. So after the huge success of week 1, it's been pumped up in America for the last, I would say, 6 to 8 weeks now. We're now into the regular season. So week 2's preview from the DFA guys is actually up on the side as well. The drama of Antonio Brown. Have you been following Antonio's exports from the Raiders to the Patriots?
He came up in my feeds today a few times, Antonio Brown. That's about all I know of him. He's been a bad boy from what I'm hearing.
What drama! What drama! If you talk about Patrick Dangerfield, and you can just times that by 100 for this kind of bloke. But he's now at New England, and you probably get a game there and probably rip it up. So, week 2 is up there, ready to go. Full slate of games. We start with Friday morning. We've also got the full Sunday/Monday slate, and then we'll do Monday night footy as well. So we'll update that particular article throughout the week if there's any news or plays that we should tip you into. Now,
any given Sunday, Smatho? Surely you've seen that.
Is that that's the foot? Yeah, obviously it's an NFL. Was that the one with what's his name? Al Pacino.
Al Pacino.
And
yep. that means you've seen the case. Have you seen the movie? Surely you've seen the speech.
No.
Wow.
No, I'm not joking here. Like literally,
Jerry Maguire. You've seen Jerry Maguire.
Oh yes, Jerry. Yes, I have seen Jerry.
You have?
I have seen Jerry. Is it Rod Tidwell who plays for the Cardinals?
Wow,
yes.
Wow. I think you've been playing dead on us, Smatho.
Oh, it's just you say these things and maybe like flooding back, but as I mentioned, all these kind of series movies like Rocky and Marvel and Star Wars just doing nothing for me. Absolutely nothing.
Nothing's more serious than Rocky and Marvel. That's for sure. Yeah, what else do we got? Racing. How good's the racing? It's back. The Spring Carnival Mystic Journey's back this week, Smatho. Your favourite horse. What about the Inevitable last week? Bolted in there at Moonee Valley. The Tassie horses are killing them. What do we got this week on Sports Chance? You tell me they got a new website.
Oh, they do. They've pushed through a new skin, but it looks pretty good. We'll have another article from Stewie this week, tipping in a few winners, and obviously make sure you get on our site to make sure you get into that. But yeah, we'll be all over Mystic Journey this week in the Mackay Diva. So make sure you check that out. And obviously, if anything coming your way, you make sure you tweet out some sneaky stuff if they're racing up in Devonport over the weekend as well.
Beautiful. How about we look at the footy?
All right, we'll talk footy. Let's go Friday night footy. Geelong versus West Coast. West Coast with a small line of 3.5 to cover. Totals at 152.5. For the sites, Moneyball have a $15,000 single contest and Draft Stars have a $60,000 single contest for this particular matchup. If we check out the resources on the DFR website, which is always 3 to use, Geelong in particular have been giving up the fewest fantasy points in the league in 2019, while West Coast sit just below the league average. That's good work there from Jesse. The ruck position is the position that does stand out where we need to target the Cats with the uncertainty of the ruck position that the Cats seem to spit out every week. In team news, well, can we believe what Geelong put out in selection now? They'll name a team on Thursday night. Not sure that'll be the actual team, but you never know. That could be correct. West Coast. Actually, before I go on West Coast, Geelong, they should have Reece Stanley back as the number one ruckman. We'll talk about Reece Stanley shortly. Menegola is probably the one looking to be outed if he does come back in. West Coast should be unchanged, but Oscar Allen was a bit of a late out last week with an injury. He may be back for the Eagles, so obviously we'll check that out Thursday evening. Hef, your boys, they've made a semi. They're going to come over to Melbourne and they're going to play the top of the ladder Cats in a elimination game. What are your initial thoughts here for this particular matchup?
My initial thought is you've missed one thing with the Eagles. How's the weather looking?
I haven't looked at the weather. What is the weather? It was a lovely day here in Hobart today.
Well, yeah, it's always lovely down here in Hobart, but I did see talk of showers during the week, but I had a quick look before we got on here, and it looks like it's going to be fine. So that's right in the Eagles' hands. I thought if it rained, then Geelong were probably going to be a bit tougher around the contest for them. But now I'm really looking forward to seeing the Eagles playing the Cats at the MCG, because we've had to put up with them down at Skilled Stadium, which is a shocking narrow ground. Doesn't suit the ball movement of the Eagles. So now I think Geelong are in a bit of trouble.
Oh, Sammy Stoser, you reckon?
Could be.
We don't mind a Sammy Stoser here in Australia. Now, let's start with the rucks. Reece Stanley, massive spotlight will put on him if he does play. Also, you got the bum from the coach last week. He knew that the bum was coming, but he's now back to take on Nick Nat and Tom Hickey. Last week we debated about the three rucks last week with Nick Nat, Tom Hickey, and whoever played last week. Don't matter. But Nick Nat ended up scoring pretty well from his time on the ground. Looked pretty great. Had his hair pulled from old Zach Merritt. So surely we're looking at Nick Nat and nobody else.
Well, I think Reece Stanley would definitely play for starters. I think because Nick Nat, he's all around the ball. He's not one that you have to worry about around the ground quite so much as someone like Grundy. So I think they sort of fried their own minds there, Geelong, worrying about Blixarve possibly having to run with Grundy all over the ground. I don't think they'll see the need to do that against Nick Nat. So I think they'll bring in Stanley, and they're going to need Blixarve to play down back. So Collingwood don't have that many tall forwards at the moment. So I can sort of understand they thought we don't necessarily need Blixarve down there at full back, but coming up against the Eagles, they're definitely going to need him. Like you say with Nick Nat, I think he's clearly a better player than Hickey. There's not much price difference between them on Moneyball. In theory, Stanley's going to play most of the game in the ruck, so that gives him a chance to sort of get towards his price. And the theory is Nick Nat's upside is capped. He got to 77, but like it's hard to see him getting more than that sort of 90 mark with his limited time on ground. So Nick Nat's the play, but if you wanted to play Reece Stanley, I wouldn't say you're a total maniac for doing so.
We did get a price drop on Draft Stars for Nick Nat. So if he was still the same price at 12.5 for this week, we would have been questioning his value, but he's down to 11. So it makes it a bit more easier to plug in Nick Nat and move on. All right, let's move on to the defence. And the tag from Hutchins. Will he employ another halfback tag here, Hef? He did go to Sard last week. I was watching him, and he didn't really do much effectiveness on the Sard and didn't get much of the pill anyway. Do you think he'll tag anyone from this particular halfback line from Geelong?
There's no obvious halfback to tag, really. I like Tom Stewart. He's not the dashing type of halfback that Sard is, and Johnny Impey was another one that he tagged earlier in the year. Like you say, he wasn't that effective on Sard last week. But ever since that Adelaide game, I know Simpson, I think he's been reluctant to take out a spot in his midfield with Hutchins tagging. I don't know. Will he even be in the team, Hutchins? If he doesn't have that obvious role to play, maybe they bring in Oscar Allen and they leave Hutchins out. I'm not 100% sure. If he is going to tag, he'd probably go to Tim Kelly, I would guess. He did the job against him last year, I think it was, or early in the season. One game he tagged Tim Kelly, so that's definitely an option. Looking at the backs here, not really many cheap backs. Like Jed Hughes is pretty cheap, but he's not a guy I really like playing, Jed Hughes. Tom Stewart and Shannon Hearn are both priced pretty well on Moneyball. You could definitely make a case to play them, especially Shannon Hearn. He's below 8,000. Just another week to get over that little hamstring niggle. I'm pretty keen to have a fair bit of Hearn. The other one I'd sort of look at is Will Schofield, 3,500. He's coming off a 50. Like he can very easily get 30, but at 3,500, he can't kill your team that much. And we've got so many high-priced guys who are pretty worth playing when you think that Geelong like to go head-to-head in the midfield. So a lot of big midfielders have got a pretty good spot here. So if you want to throw Will Schofield in and spend your money elsewhere, then maybe that's not the worst idea in the world.
Okay, very good, very good. All right, let's move on to the midfield. And as you can see, you can't really go past Patrick Dangerfield when he's in finals mode. So you probably need to consider him. Sparkle Narkle is also a mid in the Moneyball lineup, so he should bounce back, but hopefully at some bit of lower ownership than from last week. And then also our Joel Selwood prediction didn't really go too well. He didn't get quite to his ceiling score, but could we have another go over him at the MCG at a nice, valuable price for Selwood? What do we think?
I like to back the truck up on players, Smatho, and Joel Selwood fits into that bill. But I was pretty keen when I thought it was going to be wetter than what it was last week, and I thought he might be in and under. But having watched Selwood, he looked awful. He just looks old. He looks slow. He's going to have a flat deck again here against West Coast, who like to possess the ball. They don't like to get involved in a real slog. I just can't have Selwood. I know he's cheap and I know he's capable, but he just doesn't look the same player to me. Narkle's the obvious bargain on Moneyball. Draft Stars price isn't too bad. I think he's still going to be pretty popular because there aren't many obvious cheapies. He is probably the best of the cheapie players, but he does bring risk. Like, he's had 2 pretty ordinary games out of his 4, and West Coast is not an easy matchup by any stretch of the imagination. So if you want to take on Narkle, there's an opportunity to do so. I don't know where you're going to find your cheaper players from, though. I want to load up the mids on this game. I think with no Duncan, like, Dangerfield's just going to play this huge role in the midfield. 15,000 he is on Draft Stars. He's about 10 on Moneyball. He seems a pretty safe play to get you 110 plus. So I think he'd be popular, but I think he's a good play. Maybe it opens up things for players like Parfitt, maybe even Gary Ablett to spend a bit of time up the ground. Depending who they bring back for Duncan. They might bring Guthrie back in, and he's probably an all right play at a cheaper price. But when you look at the Eagles, Gaff's pretty safe. Redden's, we've talked about him being a final specialist. He was really good last week. Shuey was superb last week, and he's not going to get much attention from Geelong. So he's definitely right in play. And then Sheed's quite cheap for what he can do as well at 8,000 on Moneyball. So there's a wealth of options there for the Eagles. How you go about picking them, I'm not entirely sure.
Let's move on to the forwards because, before I go on, it's all about your narrative for Friday night. If you think the Eagles are going to win, you might have to stack your mids, but balanced play might be the go. These are 2 good fantasy scoring sides, and obviously they've got really good midfields. You just have to play a couple of sides with your narratives and see how they spin off. Now, also in the forwards, Narkle's actually on Draft Stars position there in forward, so he's going to be pretty chalky in the forward. So, as Jesse indicated in his article, there are some big scores, a few and far between for the forwards down here. So, we might just have to pay down here, Hef, and just, as I said, load up on the bids and try and find some rough guys down here in the forwards.
Yeah, I think so. First of all, I'm always worried when West Coast come up against Geelong because they defend the talls pretty well. Blixar is obviously an excellent defender, and they are very good covering for each other in the air. So it looks a hard matchup for Darling and Kennedy. They're going to have to be right at the top of their game to score well. I do like the extra space, though, at the MCG compared to playing down at Geelong. So we had Cripps was really high owned last week, actually, and for good reason. He ended up turning up at what was a pretty cheap price. I think he's still too cheap. Rioli, we've talked about his record at home, but I think this is the type of game that will suit Rioli. He's a big game player. And I like trying to find the goal kicker against the Eagles. Essendon didn't really have one last week, but if Tommy Hawkins is ever going to stand up, this is probably the time. If they can get it in quickly without McGovern sort of roaming across with him, there's always the chance for that big forward to kick a bag. So he's very cheap on Draft Stars too, Hawkins. So he's in play. And then someone like Brian Myers can just sort of weasel his way out the back of the web and might bob up and kick 3 or 4. So maybe he's in play as well. But like you said, Jesse mentioned in his article, it's hard to find really strong forward plays here. So maybe if you go a bit cheaper, and we'll spend the money mainly through the midfield.
Excellent, Hef. Thank you for your thoughts on this particular match. Now, Smatho Sneaky is back. We missed out last week, but I thought I brought it back this week. Also, later on this week, we're going to have a massive fantasy props article. After nailing a couple in the last few weeks, we thought we might go mega this week, and we'll bring out a mega props article. But I've already found one straight away, and we're going to talk about Gary Ablett's over and under on Bet Easy. They've set a line of 86.5. Our projections on the DFR site actually have them at 92 at the G on what we're going to be predicting as a flat track. I like the overs here, Hef. You're nodding your head in agreement.
Oh, I'm not in love with it, but if I had to choose, I would go the overs with you. So Duncan out, I think, maybe opens up a bit more time for Ablett to get up the ground. It's do or die for the Cats. So the greatest player of the last 15 years, you'd expect that it's time for him to stand up. So on that basis, yeah, I think you found one.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Saturday night footy, the second final, which is between Brisbane Lions and the Great and Western Sydney Giants, up at the Gabba. Brisbane are favourites with a 7.5 line with a total of 162.5. As for the sides, again, Moneyball have popped out a $15,000 single contest and Draft Stars with a $60,000 contest for a $15 entry. Looking at the resources on our DFR website, don't die there, Hef. You all right, mate? It's very stingy across the boards for both teams, regularly in the bottom 5 for points against. Everywhere, backs, mids, forwards, but then you come up across the rucks and you'll find that that is the Giants' Achilles heel. They give up points in their ruck division. In team news, we've already lost Mitch Robinson to a hamstring, and GWS have lost Brett Delidio to a calf. There might be some personnel changes that also go with some form players as well. Hef, great Saturday night matchup, this one up in the Gabba. I'm sure you would have been loving Richmond's performance against the Lions last week. So we get to see Brisbane again up in the Gabba. 2 stingy sides. So can you think of something that we can do here for this particular game?
Well, I do remember when they played in round 16 in Sydney, thinking how stingy both teams were, and then they actually scored quite a high number between them, which sort of caught me on the hop a bit. One thing to notice, Matt DeBoer wasn't there in round 16. So we saw Neil, Zorko, McCluggage, they all scored big tons. They just disappeared after halftime, Brisbane last week. I don't really know how to read this game. GWS, they come up, they've sort of got the pressure off. There's all sorts of pressure on Brisbane in their first real crack at it for a long time. Maybe the situation gets a bit too much for them, but it's worth noting that if they kick straight in that first quarter, it might have been a bit of a different story. So it's such a tricky game to work out. I've toed and froed on this one all week, Smatho, so I'm not really sure. So I'm going to play a range of different teams in this one, I think.
Well, I don't think you'd be too keen to be playing Mumford for the Giants against Steph Martin and the Big O. Martin's been very, very consistently high scoring for the Lions, so I'm sure you'll be just picking Martin as your first pick and move on. Would that be the case?
I wouldn't turn you off it. It seems pretty obvious, doesn't it? I don't really like the Big O because I rate the GWS backline, so I don't think he's going to get a lot of points when he's up forward. Only thing I will say is Mumford is down to 8,300 on Draft Stars, and last time these two teams played, he didn't play, but Dawson Simpson scored 80-something against Steph Martin and had 44 hitouts to Steph's 52. Suggests there might be a lot of stoppages, and Mumford's going to be pretty much in all of them. So I like to think that maybe 8,000, it wouldn't be too hard for him to return value on Draft Stars. But, Steph's clearly the number one choice in the ruck, but I think there's a little window there, at least on Draft Stars, if you want to maybe go for something different and give Mumford a little chance to bounce back.
All right, so you're giving him a chance then?
You're saying there's a chance. Surely you've seen Dumb and Dumber. You're saying there's a chance.
I've seen bits of it.
I'm sure there's people at home saying they watch it every week here on a Wednesday night, but it's a classic Dumb and Dumber.
You're a farmer.
Dumber and Dumberer, not so much. You definitely wouldn't call that, and I wouldn't suggest you do. But Dumb and Dumber, put it on the list.
Didn't they make like two? Didn't they do like 2 sequels?
I think
like they just had a recent movie.
I think they did one, and then there was some sort of off-Broadway thing that they They just got a couple of random snoozes to do it in between, which
That's
shouldn't
why I
see the
don't.
light of day.
Why waste my time watching that dribble? Anyway.
We'll look after
Speaking of dribble, these guys are not dribble. The defense for both sides, they've been holding up their teams fantasy ways all season long. Now, I've noticed the cheat sheets on the DFR website show that there's some good value here on Moneyball for players such as like Finlayson, Shaw, Kennedy, and even our Phil Davis has actually shown up a bit of value on Moneyball. So we could plug these guys in these spots in the back line and move on, or should we look towards more of the Brisbane side where you can see that our mate Lukey Hodge turned up last week after tipping him in. But the rest of the team were actually pretty train wrecks in terms of their failure scoring. I don't think anyone got over 50. So should we just look at Giants, value guys and move on, or should we consider a bit of Hodgie and these boys back at Brisbane?
Yeah, I found it very hard to find someone I love playing. These Brisbane backs have done my head in all year. Witherden, how bad has he been all year? Rich has been okay, but you've got to pay for him. I think what we saw from these two teams, Heath Shaw, Luke Hodge, a couple of real cool heads. I'm not sure Hodgie was overly great when the ball went to ground and Dustin Martin was standing next to him and made him look older than me. But I just think the cool heads, they tend to get the ball in these finals. Players, they tend to look for them. They think, these guys won't let us down. So I'm quite happy playing Shaw and Hodge. I think they're pretty reasonably priced. I have no real opinion outside of them, and I think I'll rotate a range of different guys through. I just don't like the backs for either team. It's hard work.
It is hard work. It's
I'll
definitive.
go with the old guys. Just play the two old guys. That's where I'll be.
The guys of finals experience. Bang, done.
Yeah. Shaw will be demanding the ball. You know that he loves these big games. Heath Shaw. So I'm actually quietly confident on Heath Shaw. He's about 11k on Draft Stars and about maybe 7-ish on Moneyball. Yeah, he's probably my top pick, Heath Shaw.
Hopefully, he gets a few kick-ins, take away from old Zachy Williams. So let's move on to the mids. Now, we did talk about round 16, how these guys actually went off against each other. But apart from that, the data suggests that I can't see much ceiling scores from either side. But being finals footy, you need to pay for the premium guys because you know they're going to be scoring fantasy points through them. Also, we need to talk about De Boer's tag as well. So point me in the right direction where he's going to go as well.
Yes, this was the really surprising thing when they played earlier in the year. I was sort of going against the midfielders. I thought, how high is their ceiling? But we've seen this in single slate games. Sometimes they go against the grain. You make a good point there about finals. Sometimes we've found in DFS, you go for the cheap guys, but it goes up a level in finals, and the cheaper guys are cheap for a reason, and sometimes they get left behind. So there's an argument for playing the big guns that you know are going to turn up and they're going to dominate the ball, and maybe you just plug some scrubs in to fit as many premiums in as you can. We would talk about De Boer. He wasn't there in round 16, as we mentioned, so we're sort of guessing their intentions. The obvious targets are Neil and Zorko. I think they'll go Neil. Jesse, in his article, he thinks they'll go Neil. He's very keen on a massive fade. I tend to agree. If De Boer does go to Neil, he's basically unplayable. He's only scored some of the last 10 weeks, last 9 games or something that he's been tagged. He's only gone over 100 once, and that was a game against Carlton when he was on 90 at halftime, and then they decided to tag him.
Keep going, because what I'm doing at the moment here, I'm actually going to go back in the data tools here on the DFR website. I'm going to go back to the Port Adelaide game, because also they put a massive hard tag back on Neil to the point they were actually bashing him up. So
they drafted Cam Sutcliffe just so he could come in and play on his mate.
So
that's where Port Adelaide was at all year. But I do remember, I think he came good late and got up to about 80 something Neil. But you want your mids to be getting 100 here if you're playing the big guns in this game. So you could take the punt on De Boer going to Neil, and then it's gonna open, whoever De Boer goes to, it's gonna open up things for the rest of the Brisbane midfield. So if he goes to Neil, you're looking at Zorko, you're looking at McCluggage, you're looking at Lyons. There's another side of the equation is that Mitch Robinson's out. So there's their wingman with no obvious replacement. They might bring in Cedric Cox, who played a couple of weeks ago, but he's not. I think they're going to lean to more Berry in the midfield, more Alan Christensen maybe gets more time on the ball. So they're in line for spikes. So when you combine the no Robinson and the De Boer taking out one of the midfielders, there's probably an opportunity to target these other Brisbane midfielders. They could be in line for a spike. How are you going with those data tools?
Yeah, 83 he scored on 11 kicks, 13 handballs, and 7 tackles. So,
and from memory, he got a lot of that when the game was sort of beyond doubt in the second half there too.
His last 3 games: 101 Geelong, 162 Richmond, 123 Richmond. So
he's going to be very popular just on that point alone. But as you say, Geelong and Richmond, 2 teams that back themselves in the midfield and they don't use a tagger, whereas GWS obviously have got basically the best tagger in the league. So that's something you've got to keep in mind with Neil, and I'm leaning towards just not playing him at all. If he comes out and tags Zorko, which it's not a 0% chance at all, because we've seen Zorko get totally chopped up by tags in the past, and he's arguably a more dangerous player because he hits the scoreboard and he's quite fast. He's charging around there, Zorko, so it's not impossible that De Boer goes to him as well. So that's what you've sort of got to consider when you're making your lineups. Talking about GWS, there's no tagger from Brisbane, so no one's particularly in the gun. I don't think anyone's particularly low priced or anything either. Worth noting, last time it was Cornelio who dominated against the Lions. He got 140 odd. There's no Cornelio here, obviously. Hopper got 106, so he's just below that premium price. He's probably right in the mix, Hopper. Zach Williams scored 120, but worth noting that Whitfield didn't play in round 16 either. And since he's been back and since Kelly's come back from his injury, we've noticed Williams go back to the back line a bit more and his scoring has dropped off. Kelly and Taranto were both under 100 last time against Brisbane, which is interesting. And Kelly was quite poor last week as well, really, from a fantasy perspective. I don't know whether that's that they're getting him out on a wing a bit more than being in the middle, but going through all that, Hopper seems like he's probably a good play from GWS.
Yeah, no, we found that Kelly had a really poor first quarter. Like I think he had like under 10 points, so that didn't really set up a ceiling game for him in the rest of the game. And obviously Hopper scored pretty well for the first 3 quarters, and then Taranto had like 10, 11 posies in the last. So yeah, I'll be backing in these GWS bits. Yeah.
One thing about Kelly, it's not very often you get to go on Kelly after he's disappointed everyone the week before. So sometimes these top players, a bad week does sting them, and then they get right back in and make amends for it the next week. So there's always that angle to take with someone with the class of Josh Kelly.
All right, let's move on to the forward line for this particular matchup. And Cam Rayner is going pretty well. The media's now starting to catch on that he's more leaner throughout the season, starting to get a bit more of the footy across half forward. So he's going to be pretty popular at his price point on both sides, and his fancy point spike that he's having at the moment. And then we've got Jezza Cameron, who, he had a day out on round 23. We thought he might regress for his first final, but no, smashes out 120 against the Bulldogs. But this is the Lions, the stingiest back forwards in the league, things like that. So one other point I want to bring up here as well is Toby Green. We've already discussed that. We probably want to fade away from him since his role's now back in the forwards. Could we make a case for him there, though?
Oh, his price hasn't come down, so it's really hard to make a case for Green, especially against a team like Brisbane. They're very hard to score against, so without that time in the midfield. He is playing well up forward, Green, so there's no need from an actual footy perspective for them to go against what's working for them there, GWS. Is this the first time Jez has been back up there since he caved Harris Andrews' face in on the lead?
Yeah.
I think
sounds
it might
about right.
be.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Get on that avocado. Have a look at that for me, mate, while Hef still goes.
I reckon there's going to be a fair bit of potential on Cameron. He made me look particularly silly last week when he He had another big score there against the Bulldogs. I'm probably more inclined not to play than to play him here. You talk about Rayner, he's going to be chalky as all hell, which is probably fair enough the way he's gone. Always looking for a possibility to go against these really popular guys and get away from the ownership. Rayner, he is very capable of throwing in a 50. He's thrown a number of 50 and below scores this season. Like you say, he's in good form. So he's an obvious player, Rayner, with the little chance maybe you want to go against him just on that ownership thing. Link McCarthy, maybe he is another one that gets the boost too with Robinson out of the team. We've seen him in and out of that midfield this year. Recent games hasn't done as much as what he was doing there, but pretty good last week against Richmond, and he might be one in play. Link McCarthy, were you about to chime in then, Smatho?
Yeah, I was going to ask, would Cam Rayner be in the winning side at the end of the night?
Oh, that's hard to say.
That's why I hesitated.
Yeah. Well, if he comes back out and has a 70 again, which he can easily do, then he's definitely going to be in the winning side. Just he does open up to play all these high price midfielders, Rayner, and you got to find a place somewhere to spend down. He's a bit like Narkle. He's the obvious one, the obvious cheapie on the slate. So even if he does have a mare, you've still got to find the other cheap guy who's going to outperform him, which there might not necessarily be one. Another one, Avocado's just told us this is the first game back for Jezza up at the Gabba. Let's hope they give it to him. What about Charlie Cameron? He's had Dylan Grimes in his pocket 2 weeks in a row. You wouldn't wish that upon anyone. And now I'm not sure that the GWS have such a great matchup for him as Grimes. We know how good Charlie can go at the Gabba. Maybe it's Charlie Cameron time.
Cool, could be Charlie time. Nice, nice.
I'd love to see a bit of Charlie time too.
Well,
when he's up and going, he's about the best in the comp to watch go to work, Charlie Cameron.
All right, I might consider it in my particular lineups if it's Charlie time. Now, one more sneaky before the end of the show this evening, and if we can bring up the next sneaky I have Luke Hodge on Bet Easy. 72.5 is the line that he's been given there. Giants in the last 5 matches have been giving up more backs points, 83 to the top 3 as part of the data here on the DFR site. So I really wanted to find an under for these particular matchups for this particular game. But, yeah, Bet Easy were pretty good and set some really good lines. But I did see Hodges 72, and I thought might back him in for another over. How do you think?
You know I hate agreeing with you on these things, Smatho.
Good.
But I sort of have to agree with you on this one here as well. Especially he was when he got 100 last week, did he, Hodge?
That's right.
These guys haven't got a whole lot of finals experience, and Hodgie does, and they're going to be looking to Hodgie just to try and slow things down and just to steady the ship, because there's going to be times when GWS come at them and they're going to need Hodgie just to keep everyone nice and calm down back. So 2 good sneakies from you. I'm happy to say, afraid to say.
Oh, very good, Hef.
One of those.
Now, one more movie to have a look for in my new marathon that I have to sit myself down and watch all these movies that I've missed out in the 30-odd years of my existence. Is there any AFL-related movies that spring to mind?
Any good ones or any... No. What about Rounders? Surely you've seen Rounders.
Rounders what? Rounders?
What's
Rounders? Who's it?
Very aggressive. I want to push that around. You've got to what? Put that one on the list. And this is my personal favourite, Old School. Have you seen Old School? Will Ferrell, Luke Wilson, Vince Vaughn, Snooper Loop. You're giving me nothing there, Smatho.
No. They're just words from your mouth at the moment. They just don't invoke memories of me watching something on a screen.
See, if we knew this back when we started the show, I'm not sure we would have gone ahead, Smatho. Anyway, I've said before, I'm insanely jealous. You can go and watch all these movies for the first time, and I wish I could do that. I've seen Old School 100 times. Okay.
Oh, all right, F. Well, thank you for taking me down memory lane where there's not much memories going on at all. So thanks for all your input tonight on the two finals here in the AFL, and plus all the news here on the DFS scene here in Australia. Make sure you check out all of our news articles, data tools on our particular website. We'll upload our show onto the AFL articles as well, so you can check out Hef's thoughts for each particular matchup. 2 weeks to go, Hef, and we'll be all done in the AFL. So the finish line is coming for you, and hopefully your Eagles are still at the pointy end in a couple of weeks' time. Good luck for Friday night, and thanks for joining me on the latest edition of the DFS Down Under show, mate. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Smatho. Get the VCR out, mate. I'll see you next week.
VCR, what is that? Catch us later.